There is a law in this country that's over 160 years old that gives ordinary private citizens the legal right to sue corporations for defrauding the government. No special credentials required, no government job. Just a regular person who saw something that wasn't right. And if they win, or if the government settles, that private citizen collects up to 30% of everything recovered. We're talking cases where the payout has reached $266 million to a single person for doing what any decent human being would do, telling the truth about what they saw. This law is called the False Claims Act. Most people have never heard of it, and I argue that's one of the most significant gaps in public knowledge in America, because this law might be the single most powerful tool available to any ordinary citizen who wants to hold a corporation accountable and get paid for doing it. Before we go any further, nothing here is legal advice, and this channel is for educational purposes only. False Claims Act cases are legally complex. If you think you have a case, the right move is to speak with a whistleblower attorney, many of whom take these cases on contingency, meaning you don't pay unless you win. More on that later. For now, let's start at the beginning. Here's something most people don't know. The most powerful whistleblower law in the United States was written by Abraham Lincoln. The reason he wrote it will tell you everything about why it still matters today. Because in 1862, the Union Army was in crisis, and not just from the Confederate forces, but internally by their own government suppliers. Congressional investigations had documented a pattern that was almost unbelievable in its brazenness. Contractors delivering boxes of sawdust instead of rifles, selling the same cavalry horses to the army multiple times, shipping uniforms sewn from compressed rags that literally fell apart in the rain, and soldiers eating rotten food so badly that they ended up dying more to that than enemy gunfire. One profiteer even left a very interesting quote, saying, "You can sell anything to the government at almost any price if you have the guts to ask." Lincoln was absolutely furious. The federal government of 1863 had no investigative infrastructure to pursue thousands of individual contractors. So Lincoln did something kind of brilliant. He turned the public into his investigators. On March 2nd, 1863, Lincoln signed the False Claims Act into law. The concept was simple and radical at the same time. If a private citizen had knowledge of fraud against the government, they could file a lawsuit on the government's behalf, and if the fraud was proven, they kept a share of what was recovered. Lincoln called on citizens to act, in his own words, against those who would feast and fatten on the misfortunes of the nation. Under the original law, the reward was 50% of everything recovered. 50. The government wanted people motivated, and it worked. Congress almost killed this law in 1943, and for 4 decades after that, it was essentially useless. Here's the story of how it came back and why the version you can use today is actually the most powerful version in history. In 1943, Congress gutted the False Claims Act, slashing the citizens' share of recovery, raising barriers to filing, and generally making the law so weak that almost nobody used it. The stated reason was they were worried about parasitic lawsuits by people who copied fraud allegations from existing criminal indictments without any real knowledge. The real effect, however, corporations that were defrauding the government had almost nothing to fear from private citizens. And by the 1980s, the problem had become catastrophic. Defense contractors were overbilling the Pentagon by billions of dollars. Congressional investigators found contractors billing the government for country club memberships, dog kennel fees, and flower arrangements as legitimate defense expenses. The fraud was enormous, brazen, and largely unpunished. So, in 1986, Congress passed the False Claims Act amendments, overhauling the law completely. They raised the citizens' reward to 15 to 30% of recovery, restored the ability of private citizens to file on their own, added strong retaliation protections so employers couldn't simply fire whistleblowers, and made penalties much steeper for violators. The law that Lincoln signed in 1863 finally had real teeth again. Since those 1986 amendments, the law has recovered more than $75 billion in fraudulently obtained government funds. More than $8 billion of that has gone directly to the private citizens who blew the whistle.